Einstein, and we know that 70% of who he is going to be that right angle cross of Eden, the 1-4. So we know he's going to be very fixed. We know that that's going to be part of his influence out into the world that's inconsistent because it's not consistently turned on. That only certain people are going to see that light, and only certain people are going to get that grounding, depending on who he's with, depending on what's aligned for him, what comes into his fractal field as a 4th line, what comes into his sphere of influence, what he's interested in getting to the bottom of, the details, the experiences with which he builds a composite database of what life is about. We know 1-4s are really very much about studying. If you have a 1-4 in your life, in your practice, a harmonic profile, education is one of the most important things you can advise for them, regardless of type. We know if they're a projector, especially because they're a projector, but also a 1-4 needs a broader base of education. So you would teach that person in that way. And you can see what we've done here. See how these are kind of faded out? I love, Katja recently showed me how to do this, how she uses layers to remove some of the activations from being solid full on each side. So you can see all of these are full. All of these are expressed except for right there. These 1, 2, 3, 4. So in reality, when you're looking at this person's chart, he has a lot of planets always activated, always dancing, always on, in full force, whatever that force means for that planet, in that channel or in that gate activation. So these are the places where this person is going to find their stability of purpose and their consistency. Now we're going to get into planetary dry roads. So here's the meat and potatoes anyway. The meat and potatoes of what we're looking at today, these planetary themes. So I'll go over each of these themes and hopefully it will make sense to you. And if not, usually practicing and playing with the thematics in your own chart and the charts of others will help you make sense of it. I know it can be really challenging when you come across something inside of your design that makes you think that how could that be, and you don't understand it. And remember, these are fingers pointing at truth. Your individual process of living this chart that you have, living this knowledge, will help unveil and reveal things that are designed to be known. And if something is still veiled or unrevealed, or you're not making sense of it, you're not sure, patience. Oops, I shared. Thank you, honey. That doesn't help with the internet. It was my habit of sharing. Okay, there we go. So back to our conversation. Look at the sun in the radiance or heavenly aspect of our life force, our earth, our grounded or worldly aspect, which we balance the light of the sun in. The moon, the motivation or pulling aspect, planet-wise, our driving force. North node is our environmental future aspect. South node is our environmental past aspect. Mercury, communication or expression aspect, perspective. Venus, which is our values or morals aspect, the love and beauty. Mars, our immaturity or teenage male aspect, which is very much about our personal transformation in this life. Jupiter, our personal law or correct aspect, our personal development. Saturn brings the judge or consequential aspect, which is a personal signpost of being out of integrity. Uranus, the unusual or chaotic aspect, which stirs things up. Neptune, the mysterious or elusive aspect, which helps us to surrender to things that are beyond our ken. If you're watching too much Scottish ken, K-E-N is beyond what we know. Pluto, the inner truth or subconscious aspect, lifelong learning. So there are our day-to-day experience, our developmental aspects, our personal compass and guidance planets, and our lifelong transformation planets. And we're going to go into these groupings one at a time. So here, if you take a look at the moon and Earth and Sun, you'll see that this is our day-to-day aspect of our lives. The day-to-day, mundane, you could say, aspects of our lives. The sun is the very light or core source of life, the central aspect of who we are and what we are here to be, a heavenly or idealistic energy, not expressed in the same way as with Mercury. It is who we are, and it is what we radiate. So this triad begins with the sun, the light of the sun. The earth is the ground that manifests the source of life. It is the critical other for the great dance of life between heaven and earth. A bit more practical, real world aspects of life. And also rooted in what lives through you. Your design lives through you. And then the moon reflects the light of life to the grounded world during times of darkness. So when the sun isn't around, there's this lunar energy, the cycles that it touches every 29 and a half days, every aspect of what it means to be human. This internal waxing and waning of the inner reflective light that shines out into the world. So these are our day-to-day experience planets. Now let's go look at Albert Einstein and just kind of get a felt sense of what's going on here. There's the same thing that we just read. Sun, the light, earth, the ground, where we ground the light of the sun. And then moon, where we have the reflection. So here he has the 36, the darkening of the light, as his sun, the gate of crisis, having either the emotional power to handle crisis or a resistance to change that will always bring crisis. This is the line of resistance. That is his core essence of what he's shining out into the world. You can see it over there, pointed up at the throat center. It is a manifestor trait. And then where is he grounding it? In the earth, as always. When it comes to that 36, the earth is on the other side, and this is the line of retreat. Conflict, the gate of friction, learning about the realization that wasting one's resources against overwhelming odds is not courage, but folly. And the emotional stability or emotional instability, always about times of conflict. That is what his body is designed to respond to. Emotionally clear helps him move forward in responding to the right thing where he can deal with the conflict in alignment with his purpose. It's either going to show up as emotional instability or emotional stability. The law is that growth can not exist without friction. This is a fundamental design component of progress. That friction there is correct in retreat. And there it is, down there. You can see that beautiful blue ball, sun and earth in a defined center. So that means then if we put it into context with the 70% and seeing that it's in not only defined channel, but also in a defined gate activation that's hanging out there, we know then that this emotional realm, that this is the power that is there for him to fulfill his life's work, has to come in alignment with him operating correctly, with him being calm or patient in decision making, not hot and fiery and always making decisions on either the high or the low, but somewhere in the middle ground. Usually emotional people get a good sense of this over time, and they grow over their lifetime to recognize, hey, that doesn't work. Let me try this. So now let's see the moon. We have the driving force waiting as an active state of awareness. So his day-to-day mundane reality, when that light of the sun maybe is bringing a lot of darkening, because we know it's a darkening of the light. Here we have the hunter. Fixed patterns in the fourth line, the hunter waiting as a guarantee of survival is what he's learning about. So the power to either make the best of one's fixed rhythm or deny one's own rhythm with predictable costs. He's learning about waiting because this is the fundamental attunement to natural rhythms. Waiting as an active state of awareness. When that's operating, now it's moon, so sometimes it will be in a their light phase, and other times it might be in a dark phase. But this is his day-to-day mundane conscious personality experience that we can see here in the defined sacral. So in relationship with this channel right here, that's going to add its flavor of waiting to the channel. Same thing we read. The sun, earth, and moon are light, are grounding, and the reflecting the light of life in the world during times of darkness. So his unconsciously defined core essence, personality, expression, life force, here we have the gate of ideas, a harmonic condition in the individual or society that permits assessment before renewed action. And this is the line of the teacher, fourth line. Gate 11, line 4 says the teacher. Here we have the ability to express the essential nature of peace is something that he's learning about. And, surprise, surprise, ideas, because it's the sun, ideas which can only be grasped by the few. So that is his core expression or experience of radiating his genetic inheritance out into the world. His ideas can only be grasped by the few. And there it is. Sun in an undefined Ashna. And now we take a look at our earth. Where is that light of those ideas that can only be grasped by the few? Where is it being manifest into the world? The gate of standstill, caution. This is the fourth line of the prophet. So a quality of restraint and the importance of meditation and inaction in confronting temptation, learning the ability to foresee and plan for the end of standstill. This is an exalted position. So the ability to foresee and express the need for social interaction and an end to caution, being a prophet, is how he grounds that light of being a teacher into the world. His ideas that can only be grasped by a few, being a prophet out into the world. That is his day-to-day mundane experience of attracting attention to some kind of truth. If he's responding and emotionally clear, he can use his words in a way that gets people to see the world differently. Do we see that he's still beyond the grave? Very much mentioned and heralded as a prophet, somebody who brought a new thing. Individuality is always about newness. A new thing forward for us to contemplate. And then we have the moon. The moon, the unconscious driving force, this is the gate of pushing upward and the determination of the self. Good fortune that may be perceived as a result of serendipity, but derives from effort and dedication in the third line of projection. His moon, in a defined state, would have lent its good fortune to that individual initiation or needing to be first. The determination to stay with what brings success would have waxed and waned within him, but been part of his day-to-day mundane reality of experience. And there's that moon, lending itself to the definition. Day-to-day experience, There's the sun, earth, and moon. Okay, so if you're keynoting this grouping in this way, that can give somebody a whole new way of looking at their design. One of the things that I get really excited about and have actually implemented in my own practice are different ways of looking at the chart. As an example, there would be no profit potential coaching at BG5 if I had not brought this method that I developed to the world. Another thing is you could also create a not self, like I did at the end of my LYD classes, the not self purpose, unveiling, revealing, shattering, dismantling your not self purpose. You could do just that as an analysis. The same potential I see here too with these planetary themes. You could just do an analysis on the day-to-day mundane experience. And instead of simply doing an analysis of line values, we just, talked about it. We didn't go into a discussion or a discourse. If I were doing a reading for a client, I could do just that and always bringing it back into context of their design in connection with the world. So it gives you other avenues of income if you would like to offer a package on all of the planetary themes and their aspects, so one would be day-to-day experience, one would be developmental, one would be personal compass, one would be lifelong transformation. You might have two of each because you have a conscious and an unconscious, and always bringing it back to that person's strategy and authority, always, but teaching them their mechanics in context. So this particular aspect seems really exciting to me, and providing more depth and nuance and flavorings to your work as an analyst. Okay, let's go look at the personal compass and guidance. Venus is your personal sense of right and wrong, your morals, how others in the world are dealt with, placed on a pedestal and raised up as the way life would be more beautiful. Now, your Venus is not for others, it's just for us, meaning the interpretation of what you value in relationships, what you love, what is beautiful to you, those things that you're learning about if it's undefined, or those things that you broadcast in your relationships with others, that is what your Venus stands for. It is your mores, okay, your personal moralistic values. Now, Jupiter says what Venus values, Jupiter will act on as a personal law. So the 11.86 mandala cycle establishes personal development. That's the Jupiterian cycle. So this is just what we must do. When you ignore this law, your own Jupiters, you can ignore it at your own peril, because Saturn will step in and challenge you or provide pain and suffering, because human beings are very much motivated by the avoidance of pain. Saturn will act up in your design, and you cannot ignore the problems that Saturn brings. So Saturn is here where our actions and beingness is judged. If we are correct, Saturn is silent and leaves us alone. If incorrect, this area will not work. It will be problematic, or it will be a thorn in our side. Saturn literally standing for the bones and aging and calcification, remember. So if you're having problems with Saturn, wherever that gate activation is, then you can look back up to your Venus and Jupiter and contemplate your ability to follow your authority when it comes to these themes. It might feel uncomfortable to face these themes. When we're correct, Saturn will be silent and leave us alone. If incorrect, this area will not work. Remember, Saturn brings over seriousness. Okay, it will be a thorn in our side, whatever that thematic happens to be. Usually, most people, if they're operating out of integrity, will recognize the problem that Saturn shows up like in their lives, is what I've noticed anyway. So getting their attention with, or just asking a few questions that give you a touchstone into that signpost with them is really helpful as far as your ability to interpret that person's chart or change your analysis, its focus in a way that's going to most land with them. Because I'll tell you in my experience, if I begin a chart analysis chasing down the wrong rabbit hole, let's say, I always ask that person, if to connect with me vocally, just share with me, even if it's a recording that I need to do with them, I need to hear where they're at, so I ask them to write me. So depending on what frequency that person is coming up with, that's how I'll start my analysis and what I'll emphasize. As you know, we know so much about human design. I could spend a whole week talking about somebody's charts, a connection with them every single day, and not get to all of the bases of the, all the downloads that I could give them. That would be overwhelming. But I'm just saying, if you need some guidance on how to treat this person as far as where they're at, Saturn is a signpost. It's a signpost of operating incorrectly. So the Saturn in an undefined state, in a gate 40, so you ask that person, are you having any digestive issues? How's your stomach? Do you ever get pain in your stomach? And if that's something that they start rambling on into all kinds of things, so maybe you don't do this in a foundation analysis, but you do it in your coaching practice, you know that you need to go back up to Venus and check out what's going on with Venus. Yeah. And where it cut out. Exactly. I just thought it very ironic. It's beautiful. Okay. So Saturn, Venus, Jupiter. Let's go look at our guinea pig, Albert Einstein, as an example. We can see his Saturn's up here in the right eye and down here in the gate of fucking sexual relations. Who knows? Let's see. Going down. Venus, we'll start with in a defined heart center. We know that the 51 is about the gall to ability to respond to disorder and shock through recognition and adaptation. But here we have the second line of withdrawal. So the egoism to reject withdrawal and face possible defeat is part of how his Venus, his values and relating, would appreciate relationships, appreciate the value of being in relationships, has the egoism to reject withdrawal and face possible defeat, to be able to handle that shock, responding to the shock as part of his initiation here. And then where we go from Venus is into Jupiter, and Jupiter brings us the line of burnout. So uncontrollable feelings and accompanying emotional outbursts here in the gate 30. Gate of feelings. Freedom recognized as an illusion and limitation accepted as a fate. This brings an unrealistic pace that begs misfortune, which is what he is learning about. So uncontrollable feelings accompanying emotional outbursts would be the expression of that Jupiter. And this in the emotional system being part of where he has his Saturn, further up that stream of feeling. And Saturn, when we get there, looks like that's the other Saturn on the other side. Saturn here, conscious Saturn, is gate 17, the gate of opinion. The ancient law that those who wish to rule must know how to serve. So the first line is openness, and this brings the possibility of having many opinions, or the flip side of limiting opinions only to what is pleasing. So in context with the design, Saturn as a painful punishment I would ask maybe, do you ever find yourself not wanting to look forward or look at the pattern? Do you ever find yourself not wanting to, or when you share your opinions, you get really frustrated? Do you have any problems with your right eye? Do you feel this insane amount of pressure to be on time? Okay, because that's logical. Logic always wants to be on time. This is an inability, if it's in suffering mode, pain mode, to actually look at where things are headed, you know, and literally having problems with one's right eye if Saturn is there. So just checking into and seeing if he is honoring his integrity of being, because Saturn is the signpost for not honoring the integrity of your being. Saturn brings us discipline. So here on the unconscious side, this one would be harder to do in an analysis with somebody who isn't aligned maybe necessarily to path and purpose yet, because this is their personal compass and it's unconscious. And so if you try to do this too soon in somebody's experiment, it might not work. You know, they might just have a total disconnect and not understand what you're talking about. It really, I would do this according to your strategy and authority, of course, you know, as far as whether you take this knowledge and start to work with it at a deeper level. Now, Venus here, the gate of the behavior of the self, we know the first lines are always modest. Okay, the innate sense to know and accept one's place is unconscious value system. So knowing one's place and how to act despite circumstances is the exaltation. On the detriment side, oversensitivity to external conditioning of behavior. Gate 10 is about knowing one's behavioralistic place with the first line there. So that would be his unconscious values and relating that would contribute to this definition, to that higher self, and make that person more attractive. You know, this is what you find attractive, so he would find attractive 34s, 57s, 20s, quite literally, depending on whether or not he responds to them, right? If they're aligned for him. And that would be his values in relating. Now, Jupiter here in the 41, we're looking at that law and protection being something that needs to be obeyed. This is the gate of contraction, decrease, the limitation of resources, which maximizes the development of potential. In the 6th line, we know it's far-reaching, the line value being contagion. So this is about ultimately looking for progress in the life, right? Because it's looking all the way down the stream of feeling, and it reaches the end to progress. So he's learning about the law that maximization of potential not only ends in decrease, but inevitably such transcendence benefits others. So on one side, he would recognize the fuel for recognition through feelings. And on the other side, he would feel the fuel for secret or repressed feelings. So this is the drive to feel that is creating his personal law and protection. So that is the Jupiter meeting up the burnout on the other side. We know that that was a 4th line and a 6th line. Yeah, not necessarily something that is comfortable, because we know that stream is very I saw the chat and I got distracted. Very volatile, potentially. Okay. Mel's saying, if somebody had explained this unconscious relationship to me years ago, it would have saved me so many problems that were on the surface very elusive. It's nuts how profound it is. I've had huge revelations. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm looking forward to whatever insights and ahas you guys have to share after we go through the example chart, because that is really tremendously valuable, right? Really tremendously valuable. And this dynamic too, the visuals, Katja, thank you so much for the visuals, because visuals do so much for me. Anybody who's got, you know, collective circuitry, it really helps ground things. So play with visuals if it's fun for you. Saturn, the discipline and the limitation, the body here, having this gate of crisis in conjunction with his conscious personality sun. This is the line, I'll read the gate first, the rule of cycles in which a decline is a natural but not enduring stage, the line of the underground. Now, exaltation shows immunity to crisis as both generator and survivor, and self-betraying nervousness in times of crisis. So how I might say or language that to ask, what's going on. Do you feel that you have a lot of problems in sharing your fear of, and now that is experiential inadequacy, and that might be a little too much. Do you feel like you have problems with facing new experiences? Might be a simpler way of putting it. Do you feel, is there something inside of you that feels really uncomfortable when you're facing a new experience? Because the fifth line here, survivor and immunity to crisis. I mean, this is about being able to rise to the occasion. Fifth lines do that. They have this potential to face the difficulties and bring forth new solutions. So a Saturn out of integrity, a lot of pain, a lot of hiding, right? Being a shy or reserved or, feeling a lot of heaviness. Remember, you can use the term heaviness with Saturn because Saturn has all this weight to it, this density. Remember, limitation, restrictiveness. It's literally being able to exhale. Ooh, I'm glad I remembered that one because the body side is different keynoting. So on the Saturn for the body, do you ever feel like you're having difficulty exhaling, fully exhaling so that you can draw your next breath? Like you can't exhale. Difficulty breathing, that might be another thing. We know that the solar plexus is about the lungs and the nervous system. So that might be a telltale signpost. Okay? I hope that was helpful. I know it has been for me. Mel says, maybe he was projected onto as a sex object, which was hard for him to deal with because he was too busy being nerdy. Oh my goodness, that's funny, Mel. I don't know. I haven't heard a lot about Albert Einstein, except to say my husband repeats quite often how he was somebody that couldn't find his way home sometimes, but was absolutely brilliant. So very interesting. Personal compass and guidance, your Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn relationship. Okay. Now we get to go to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And this next piece is about something that has a lifelong transformational quality to it. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto giving us these larger thematics that oftentimes, you'll notice that there's a repeating pattern between your conscious and unconscious with these because they do move so slowly and they do spend a lot of time in retrograde and so forth. So anytime you see an repeating pattern that's an emphasis to that thematic of your lifelong transformation or learning, let's go into each of these individually. So the lifelong transformation for Uranus, in its unusualness, it brings possibility for change, transformation, and chaos. Its discovery coincided with the 7 to 9 centered beingness for humanity. It keeps life from becoming sedentary. So, not enough movement. Uranus is about movement. Neptune. Neptune brings a deeply mysterious and veiled thematic. We just cannot see it directly. Best to leave it alone, says Ra, although the mind will be endlessly curious about it, and allow it to bring the mystery to us, revealing itself when ready. Neptune about our hydration on the body side. I said movement for Uranus. I'll continue the pattern. And Pluto. Pluto brings inner truth to your life experience. Takes a lifetime to learn means that after age 50 is when it becomes vital and relevant. So the deeper meaning of your life is found here. And Pluto is about inhalation on the body side. this ability to get to the depths of the profound truths in one's life. So let's go look at Albert Einstein as our example, conscious personality side. Remember, this is where we have experimentation potential. So here it is Uranus in an exalted position because Uranus exalts this line. And dispersion, the gate of sexuality, is the ability to break down barriers to achieve union. So his response coming from this gate, this is the line of shyness. Designed to have self-imposed barriers is what he's learning about. And the restriction of the sex drive to maintain separateness would be his unusual expression here. And also you can see on the other side when we get to it that this Uranus was actually in retrograde because he was going from fifth line to second line, and that's backwards, right? So that's interesting to note. When we get to the Neptune, illusion, art, spirituality, transcendence, the thing that's hidden from him is the gate of rationalization, the spontaneous, natural and spontaneous process of transformation and renewal. First line here is called the sin of omission. Learning about the transformation that requires retrogressive periods before renewal can take place. So the Neptune itself is pulling this line into the detriment or the difficult expression. Inspiration that leads to an irrational focus on what is past. Inspiration that leads to an irrational focus on what is past. So we know then he would have an attunement to wanting to study or understand the mysteries, potentially irrationally focusing on what is past. And that would be one of the ways that he's learning about what really is inspiring and what really is interesting. Studying the mysteries of life, science is one of those that allows us to pierce the veils of the mysteries in some respects. Pluto, we have gate 8. Now this is an interesting activation for him. I'll show you why I noticed this. Pluto here is, again, truth transformation psychology in gate 8, which is about contribution or holding together the basic worth realized in contributing individual efforts to group goals. First line in the gate 8 is honesty and learning truthful acceptance of limitation and recognition that it can only be transcended through sharing. On one side, showing this knowing that creative expression must be honestly communicated and shared, and on the detriment or the difficulty, the design to share creatively at the expense of individuality. So that would be one of his deepest truths and learning. We can see that it's in an undefined state. So remember, with the undefined Plutos, it's where one might feel like the ground beneath one's feet, you're losing it when this potentially isn't being learned or fulfilled. This truth isn't being paid attention to. And now here's what I noticed. See the Pluto in gate 8, line 1? I noticed it very late, as far as like right before our meeting together today. And I tried to Google and find out whether that, like, is that Pluto stationary? Had it just retrograded or was it about to retrograde? I wasn't sure. But nonetheless, we don't really use retrogrades in human design because we have the repeating thematic that shows it will be duplicated and therefore lots more emphasis placed on having two activations. So an unconscious element as well as a conscious element of this inherent need for truth. So what I imagine with this man is that potentially maybe it's his benefit to the collective, or in a past life he wasn't truthful, and that one of the deepest learnings in this life was he needed to learn about truth and to express himself with integrity and honesty, because that is part of what these lifetime learning themes are bringing to the table for him. Okay. So Uranus, the unusualness, chaos, and innovation in, again, sexuality, like we mentioned. This is now fifth line. So the body itself, isn't that interesting? The body itself imprinted with the gigolo. the adventurous, the power of sexuality expressed as sexual power. That was the body. And if you remember the mind was shyness. Uranus detrimented that line too into barriers, self-imposed barriers. So we can see the double right there. In that channel that creates his response to life. Now here, his other Neptune is in the gate of nourishment, caring, the enhancement of the quality and the substance of all activities through caring. Sixth line here is called wariness, learning a protection against an abuse of generosity. So what's hidden from him, what's unconscious and yet present and relevant to his life, is that the power and strength to be realistic in one's capacities to care and nurture are on one side. And on the other side, the power of suspicion in limiting the expression of caring. Now remember, the unconscious activations are things that are quite seen, you could say, by others. Other people can see that which you do not have necessarily a conscious connection to in your own design. So this would be something, ultimately, sixth line, it's about learning what is best for the support of the tribe. And that would be something that's unconsciously hidden from him. And that illusion, art, spirituality. My mind goes into these curious little, I have no idea if it matters or not. But if it's Neptune, does that mean when he's dehydrated, he has issues with caring? I don't know. But that's the way my silly little mind works. Now, Pluto. Pluto, truth, transformation, and psychology. We have the, again, basic worth realized in contributing individual efforts to group goals. How? Honesty. So the depth of the profound truth and transformation in his life, if he would accept that one must be honest to have integrity in communication in order to hold that group together towards those group goals. Again, the same line value. So knowing that creative expression must be honestly communicated and shared. And even, this is one of the rare places where we see the word the design in context with just a line. The design to share creatively at the expense of individuality. At the expense of individuality. So that would have been his deepest truth that would have transformed his life over his lifetime. Okay. Now we go look at the developmental aspects. Did you notice we skipped the nodes, Mercury and Mars? Okay, developmental aspects. Developmental aspects. The nodes of the moon are something that unfold over our life. We know. Oops, did I read it yet? Hang on. I didn't. Sorry about that. Okay. So the developmental aspects, as I skipped it, I talked about skipping it, and I just skipped it. So here, a variety of indicators under the nodes. The most basic being the environmental trajectory, an indication of where we came from and where we are going. The Uranus opposition indicates the shift from south to north node emphasis. Remember, you never leave the south node behind when that nodal environment is in a channel, that it is a solid path or fixedness. And then Mercury brings our quick thinking, potentially or not, typically represents our expression or our message to the world, bringing expanded consciousness. This is what establishes that 88-day gap between the design and personality crystals. Side note, I've also noticed that Mercury has a pretty strong effect on cryptocurrency, and that's something interesting to observe as well. Lightning fast information. Messaging, speed. I would imagine that it has a lot to do with the internet as well. Mars, not to be underestimated nor forgotten, suddenly will come to life and is prone to immature action. Now this, have you ever noticed this? It fixes 61 of the gates into an exaltation or a detriment in one or more of the lines. So it's an unpredictable force to be dealt with. And potentially maturing with age. I just noticed that there's a little dude out here on Mars. There's a little, did you notice that, Katja? It's kind of like Where's Waldo? Like, where's the little hidden image? Ooh, that's so much fun. I love it. There's a little dude over there on Mars, a little rover. Okay, back to Albert Einstein. Here, North Node, future direction and environment, the most impressive, I think it was him actually. I don't know who said this, but there was somebody who said imagination was more important than, the logic side. I can't even remember the actual quote, if any of you remember it. But he had the strength of imagination. So if it was him, I wouldn't be surprised. And here, this nodal environment is in the first line, reasonableness, which is learning about the appropriate delegation of responsibility. Exalted is coolness, where the energy to release feelings is selective. And in detriment, the hothead, the urge to release feelings. So when that thing would actually release, we can see potentially influence to the exalted or the detriment. Okay, there. Oops, down there in the 41. I was having a private joke with myself because so much more as I'm teaching, especially this analysis training, I'm hearing the feedback from everybody else, that same recognition that I have had for years, and yet it just keeps, it keeps like a little fish that goes around in the fishbowl and it's like forgets that it went through a castle and they get, oh, wow, a castle. And then it keeps going. My little story about that. It's like every time these exalteds and detriments show their face, and actually you see, if you just see the ramifications of what that means, when you are in a relationship with somebody who has Neptune or Venus, and you've got that reasonableness in your design, you will either be reasonable or unreasonable. It's just how it is. And so it shows so much more the choicelessness, helplessness. We have the north node of the moon here, both sides, as part of how this person is going to move towards walking that path towards that pressure to fantasize, that pressure to feel. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Katja. And Michaela, I want to read those. Imagination is more important than knowledge. There it is. That's the word. Imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited to all we now know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. Yeah. Start codon. Katja. I got confused. I have so many K names, especially yesterday in my classes. Katja's pointing out, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. I love both of them. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for getting that for me. I don't remember straight quotes most often, unless they're very, very short. Mel saying, my design earth in an undefined route. Ah, it's true. The learning. Yes. Yes. These are developmental is another word you can use for the nodes, the stage, the Mercury and the Mars. Developmental. Okay, developmental is the word you want to remember. South node. Here we have the 31, past direction and end environment, the gate of influence, the law of friction, whether active or passive, that engenders transference and thus influence. First line is manifestation. Influence cannot exist in a vacuum. This is, in its exalted phase, the natural expression of leadership. In its detriment, the unnatural expression of leadership. And yet, you can hear both of them are talking about leadership because this is the gate of influence. And influence cannot exist in a vacuum, you learn, because you're not alone here on this planet Earth. This is collective. In order to be a leader, we must have others. In order to be a potential alpha, there must be others who elect one to lead. So here we can see both nodes of the moon, just like before here. I'll probably avoid reading those because I can feel my throat going and we're getting a little bit late. I want to have time for you guys to talk story a little bit. We'll have more time tomorrow and the next day. Mercury, communication and thinking. We have gate 25, the innocence, spirit of the self, perfection of action through uncontrived and spontaneous nature. 6-9 is called ignorance, false innocence betrayed by actions, the loss of innocence through inappropriate action, and then constant inappropriate action in times of challenges that can break the spirit. This is the spirit of the self. You know, you think of gate 25 as the love of all that is, you know, the unconditional love of the great unknown. And then you see that the 6th line says ignorance, false innocence betrayed by actions. What? But that is his Mercury. Inappropriate action. Do you see how both of them, even the exaltation, says inappropriate action? And yet that is what is creating his consistency in this channel. So it's a developmental thing. 6th line. First 30 years. Made mistakes with that. And then ultimately, what is it looking towards? Empowerment of individuality. Where is it going? It's going into the realms of awakening. The expression of the higher self into the world. 60. Mars. Energy dynamics. Immaturity. The child stomping his foot. I'm frustrated. Here's the gate of acceptance, limitation. The acceptance of limitation is the first step in transcendence. First line acceptance, harmonic energy that can deal with external limitations. I was going to say limitizations. And then on the flip side, restless energy when confronted with external limitations. He may or may not mature through this. It's first line. There it is. Constantly defined. Inconsistent because it operates there or not in a pulse. And this is where we have a potential hothead, as we can use a first line term there, because it's Mars. Okay, other side, the nodes. Going to skip reading because, oh wait, I can't skip reading. It's a different line. Never mind. Look at the 3rd line. Here we have the efficiency. I like this line. I have this in my, I think it's Mercury. Yeah. In times of decrease, selfishness is justified. This is the gate of contraction. So the energy that fuels the feeling for personal ambition or will fuel the feeling to share. And you're learning about when there's times of decrease, selfishness is justified because 2 will use the resources twice as fast as 1. Oh, you got to learn this one from experience. It's a really, really good one to know. Okay, that's the path that he's walking. And then we are looking at the 3rd line of influence. So here, it's called selectivity in gate 31. The capacity to lead enhanced through association with the proper influences. Remember, bonds made and broken. To bond or not to bond? That is the question for the 3rd line. The drive to lead that will accept any follower. Openness, remember? And the risks of what happens when you accept any follower. So that would have been his, again, these are the south nodes, developmental stages upon which his life is set. Mercury, communication and thinking. Ooh, nice place to have a Mercury, the gate of the fighter. The ability to preserve individual integrity through opposition to detrimental forces. This is the line of alliance. Remember allegiance, rejection? Here's alliance. The energy to integrate with others in times of struggle or selfishly use others in times of struggle. Yep, that is the Mercury. Unconscious communication and thinking, developmental over this man's life. Okay, the message into the world. Here we have Mars, our last activation here with this example chart, the gate of power skills. What a great line to have. Money isn't everything. The recognition that wealth has its own problems. Yes, indeed. The key to manifesting power is higher principles. And on the flip side is energy alone can never be the key. Money isn't everything with this power skills. The accumulation and retention of power through skilled interaction, coupling grace with control. that is something that he would be learning about. Grace with control, Mars, bull in a china shop. First line, money isn't everything. Learning about all the problems that wealth brings. Yeah, and in response, being emotionally clear. This would be going through its developmental stages.